Today, I'm very excited to share with you the topic Greg's 7 indispensable tools that he uses as a business analyst. Let's get started. So, welcome everyone. I'm very excited today to introduce you to my special guest, Greg Lemire, and he's going to share with us some of his amazing tools that he's developed over many years that is absolutely um, indispensable to him. But before I let the cat out of the bag, as they say, I would like to introduce you to Greg and ask him to tell us a bit about how long have you been a business analyst?
Okay, hi Esther. Hi everybody. Yeah, my name's Greg Lemire. I'm down in New Zealand and I've been a business analyst for probably last at least 15 years, probably a little bit more. Other roles that I've done, I've kind of dipped into the business analysis space, but full-time business analysis for the last 15 years or so.
Excellent. And ever since I've met Greg, I've been really impressed with how you are able to um, make business analysis really practical. And that's why I wanted us to have this conversation today to share your practical view on business analysis through the tools that you use. Now, do you want to, before we jump into these amazing tools that you've built, um, can you tell us what is those tools? How did they come about? And why did you end up developing them for yourself?
Okay, yeah, really good question. I think they kind of happened, it was quite organic. So when I first started my business analysis, I was like everybody, just, a lot of trial and error and kind of just using other people's tools that are on projects and that sort of thing. And then kind of over time, I just found that there were a number of tools that I always kind of went back to. And then they essentially kind of started shaping how I did business analysis. And while there's some very the tools that that I have are kind of almost like the framework, and then I'll bring in other tools as I need for specific projects. But these are the ones that I just find that I was going to say 80%, but I'd probably actually say much more than that. The tools that I would pretty much use on every single project, and that they kind of fit together. So you kind of do this one, and then you do that one, and then you take some from that step, or that artifact, and put them in here, and so they just kind of seem to work really well together. So I thought it'd be great, or we did thought that'd be a great one to share. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like the ultimate toolbox to start with. And then what you are, from what I understand as well, is you are not saying that these are the only tools that a business analyst should use, but rather that it's the core set of tools that you will then use to drive some of the other tools and techniques that we apply as business analysts to kind of deliver upon some of the things that comes out of these bread and butter tools of yours.
yeah.
But let's not delay any further. I'm very excited to share this with everyone. So maybe you can just tell us before you take us through each of those tools during this video, what did you call these tools? I love the title you've given it.
Oh, my 7 indispensable tools of business analysis.
Yes, I think
Yeah,
they
I
are
worked
indeed.
I worked a long time on that title. I think, yeah, it literally was as I said before. I just kind of realized over time that they were indispensable. I don't think I can do projects without them. So yeah,
Okay, so let's share them with everyone. We'll jump
okay,
straight into the first one, guys, and Greg will take us through them.
great, let's go. The first one is a problem statement. Really important to understand the problem before you go off to try and solve it. So I've come up with a set of questions that I work through first. So rather than just trying to sit down and writing the problem statement, what I actually do is I have this set of questions. I work through them usually with other people. So other people in the project, maybe even the business owner, ideally the business owner as well. So other people or the person that I'm generally doing the work for. So I'll work through the questions here. So there's different sections. There's background and context. There's a problem description. There's impacts of the problem. There's evidence that the problem exists. There's the scope and the stakeholders, so who cares about it, and then the desired outcomes. And then what I do once we've answered that, and just to be clear, I wouldn't necessarily answer every one of those questions every time. It may depend on the project, but I will go through and I'll choose which ones of those that I think are relevant for the particular project or problem that I'm working on. And then from there, I would start writing the problem statement itself. A lot of the time, in an ideal situation, I would write it with other people that are on the project or the subject matter experts, and also ideally the business owner. And sometimes I would even drop the questions and the answers into something like ChatGPT, just to help me to make a start on the problem statement, and then I'd kind of validate it with those people. Sometimes that works really well as well, but I'd kind of do that on a case-by-case basis, and it kind of really depends on how much kind of buy-in the other people in the project have got, how much time they've got. The more time I kind of feel working with them on that, the more kind of buy-in they get. So that's the problem statement one. And then once I've got that, then I would drop the problem statement into here, so I've kind of got a record of it. And this is just here is actually a little bit of an example, but these are the types of things I find in a problem statement. It's really useful to have a section on the context, section on the a sentence, sorry, not a section, a sentence on the context, a section on the problem, a section on the impacts, a section on the evidence, or a sentence, and then something on the scope, just so that it's really clear on what's in and out of scope.
So, Greg, this looks very comprehensive, and I'm very curious, how did you get to this stage of having this list? I mean, I know that you've got many years of experience as a BA, and I know that you often have to, work as a solo independent business analyst in your organization. So I'm just curious, what prompted you to develop this particular set of questions?
Yeah, it's really good. It's a good question. I think partly trial and error with writing problem statements. And when I first started doing them, I understood intuitively, intellectually, the value of the problem statement, but I didn't really know how to write one. And so I just
Okay.
used to write them.
Yeah.
And then over time, I think I just kind of got more and more structured. And then eventually, I with ChatGPT, I started talking to ChatGPT and saying, well, if can you write me a problem statement? Well, actually, what questions should I be asking in
Yeah.
order to get a good problem statement? So that was a bit of an evolution, but I've been doing problem statements for years, but it's
Yeah.
more recently where I've actually got to this point of having all of these questions where I've kind of said to ChatGPT, okay, if you're gonna write me a problem statement, what questions should I ask? And then it gives me the questions, and then I can then answer those and then drop it back in, and it gives me a problem statement. But it hasn't always been like that. It has been a
Yeah.
little bit of evolution
No,
in
that
that
sounds
respect.
amazing. And it's also a great example of how a business analyst can use ChatGPT or any LLM to help you to get more structure, be more comprehensive, ask absolutely all the right questions at the right stages.
Yeah.
And I think this is an amazing example of combining your experience, your knowledge that you need something like this, and then to use ChatGPT to add a bit of, just to double check and make sure you're thinking of all the right things, and then to take it to the business or to your team to kind of brainstorm together. I think it's a great approach and a great use of this particular stage of any initiative to try and identify what is the actual problem we're trying to solve. I mean, how often do people just skim over this part? So
Yeah.
it's absolutely valuable. So I love your first tool. I think it's essential. Every single person or every single business analyst should really take a hard look at this and make sure they build it into their process.
Great. Thank you. I just want to add as well, the having a really good problem statement is so useful for so many different reasons. People come and ask you a question. Hey, what's that project about? Oh, let me send you the problem statement. Or
Yeah.
change management. If you're working with a change manager, I do a little bit of my own change management. You're doing change impact assessment. You can kind of put that in there. Project charter, which we're going to talk about, or BA charter,
Mm.
goes in there as well. So you kind of just reusing the the content quite a lot. So yeah.
No, it sounds amazing.
Excellent. So the next one is a stakeholder register, and I could probably honestly say that I don't have a stakeholder register, or I don't have two stakeholder registers that look the same, because I'm always changing them depending on the different project. I'm putting in different columns and things, and part of the reason for that is because quite often you're dealing with people at different levels of the organization. Sometimes their interest and influence is really important, and other times it's not really a factor, and I'll take those out. But the key ones that I have is who is the person, or sometimes it might be a group. So if it's a group of project managers, or a group of asset planners or something, a place I'm working at the moment. So you'd have the name, their title, why are they a stakeholder, what are their stated requirements or expectations, I think is really important. So when you're talking to people, it's really useful to say, I spoke to, Carol, and Carol said that, please make sure you do this. You kind of pop it in there, and then it's just like a little checklist for you later, so that as you're working through your project, you can kind of just run your eye down and say, am I still meeting my stakeholders' requirements? Because I think one of the key things that I've kind of realized working in business analysis, or in everything you do, is that you can't judge by people. They either give you an A+ for your work, or they give you a C or a D or whatever. So if you can kind of figure out what's the marking schedule, your stakeholders are marking your work, what's their marking, if you can build a marking schedule from that, all the different people, make sure you're engaging with them. That's a big one as well, because otherwise you get what I call an allergic reaction when you come up with a solution and you go and talk to people and they go, this is the first I knew of it. Why didn't you think of that? Why didn't you think of that? I don't like this solution. So if you're kind of getting the right people involved, then and kind of doing something like this, then you have the interest and influence. And I generally would often also just have a notes thing. It's just like anything else that you kind of need to record.
Yeah.
And again, just having this has there's a lot of different benefits to it. So if you need to do a comms plan, if you need to do a who do I talk to for a particular problem, that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's also, like you say, it's a great way to keep track of who you are engaging with. It's a great way to communicate that fact to different parts of the project so that everybody can agree that you are engaging with the right people. But I think the part that I really like, and the best part here, is your expectations column. And that's something that you wouldn't necessarily always see in a typical, stakeholder matrix or a ratio or whatever. And it's so important because, like you say, they are really like the teachers giving us a grade in a way, being our clients. And if you can really understand what their expectations are, and then make sure you keep track of that, and you come back and you make sure that you tailor all your communication and output towards or in alignment with their expectations, you will get an A+, like you said. And that's our goal, is to get that A+. So it's a beautiful metaphor that you used. And yeah, I like that special column there. I think it's very practical and real world and very useful.
Awesome. Very good. All right. So moving on. So the next one is a SIPOC. This one is from Lean, or from Six Sigma. It's a tool from Six Sigma. So the idea of this is that you list your processes. You try and keep it to, I think the original guidance was 5 to 7 steps. So you're trying to do that kind of high level 30,000 foot view. I've done ones where I've had 30 steps. I don't have a problem with that. If you've want to go to the next level and you still want to see what your process, what the steps are, what the inputs and suppliers and what the outputs and outcomes and customers are for a longer thing, that's fine. There are no rules, the guidelines. So I follow this. So in terms of the value of this, it's a really good way of actually, if you're looking at your inputs and then who's supplying them, so who's involved, who are your major people in your project, or that where you're getting the information from, or where your processes, and then the same with the outputs and outcomes, and then the customer. And quite often, if it's a sequential process, the customer of this one will be the supplier of this one, sort of thing, if that makes sense. So if someone's doing process A, and then and you're doing it for them, and then this one here, if they're relying on that, then that's the customer. So really quick to fill out. The other thing I've been doing more recently with these, so this is for a process, and if I was ever going to do a swim lane or something like that, I'd probably try and do something like this first, just to get that high level view and understand who's involved and what's being produced, etc. And then I'd probably go to the next level of detail for the swim lane. But the other application or use case for the SciPoc more recently is as a kind of roadmap for your project as well. So if you're kind of thinking you're here, this is your current state, this is your future state, there's a kind of a journey that you're going along, map the journey down there, and then what are the inputs on the way to that, and who's supplying that, what are the outputs, and who are your customers. And then you've got a really nice little roadmap that you can kind of show people, and people say, oh, I heard you're working on this project, can you tell me a bit more about that? Yeah, sure, look, here's my my SciPoc, and and I just get really good results from this, really good feedback. People just really like it. And then you can add in other little bits and pieces as well along the thing. You can have, I've done one recently where people wanted to record what decisions are made
Oh,
at each
yes.
part of the
Yeah, that's
thing. So
great.
we had a column for decisions. We also had another column for risks. So what risks are we facing at this stage? So there might be a risk around, if it's on that journey or even in a step. The risk could be that the person that's supposed to be doing that step or is resource constrained or something like that. So you can kind of put that in there, and then as soon as you can see that, you can talk to them, explain to them what why it's important that they make the time frame and that sort of thing. So I find the SciPoc super useful. And as I just quickly circling back, in terms of the when you're doing process mapping, quite often I will do a 5 to 7 step, before I get into the swim lane. And I just find if you've got time, doing the extra, this extra little bit can quite often pay quite big dividends. So,
Yes, absolutely. I can see how this would be an extremely uh, useful tool, like you were just explaining, to keep track of a roadmap of tasks almost, or chunks of work that needs to be done. I can see how this would just make it so good for people to follow along, apart from the obvious benefit of using it for its original intent in terms of actual process, input, output, suppliers, and customers. That would be useful too. And I can see how this can be done at multiple levels. So, like you were saying, you could have this almost like you can have a high level step one, which you can then explore and have another SciPoc that breaks it down to the next level. So,
yep.
no, it's a great interpretation of the SciPoc, and as you with all the things you do, it's a very practical application. So I really like how this can be used as well.
Oh, thank you. All right. The next one. This is my favorite one. It's the most simple concept you'll ever see. It's the no wonder. I found this in a book I think it was about 2 years ago. And basically, when they explained it, you get a piece of paper, you put a line down the middle. On one side, no, the other side, wonder, and then whatever you're working on, what are all the things I know about this problem, or I know about this project, or I know about this person, or this process, whatever it is, and what do I wonder about it? What don't I know? And it's
Yeah.
that kind of you known unknowns, or and then you write those down, and then I never know what to call this one, but the essentially the third column, the notes. I quite often have notes, but what I'm trying to do, the goal when I do a no wonder is I'm putting down all the no's, and that helps me just to clarify stuff and organize in my head. Then I know what I wonder, and then my goal is to get the wonders into the no column.
Yeah.
And so I work through that. And if I wonder when I need to do this by. So then I've got a little action over here. I need to talk to such and such and find out when I need to do this by. And then that turns into a no. And then I move it over to there and say, I need to do this by this date.
That's really good.
And
Yeah, I
then
was
so the
just going to
goals,
say, that
yeah,
notes column is almost like the actions you have to
yeah,
take. Yeah.
yeah. I just never know what to call it, but actions would be, that's thing. But it could be for anything. But that's how I use the no wonder, and I find it really really cool. It's almost like, why didn't I think of this before?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
No,
so simple.
yes, I hear you. It is so simple, but yet so powerful. I mean, how often do we make this distinction? And it
Yeah,
can really expedite and you can be a lot more efficient if you can distinguish between what you actually know and what you're still wondering about. And you can
yeah,
go and use this in a project context as well. You can go and have meetings around this, and no wonder.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, really
Wonderful.
good as a workshop. You could have a workshop and just say, "We've got this problem. It's just come up. What do we know about it? What do we wonder about
Mm,
it?
mm.
Workshop that. What are we going to do?" And people will come out, I'd say, feeling pretty empowered. I've never actually done that before, but I think I might run a no wonder workshop at work.
I
Come up
think you
with
should.
what are we going to have for lunch?
Very good.
Um, cool. All right. So the next one's BA Charter. This is one of my favorite ones. I've got a few different formats for this, but essentially try and do something like this for every piece of work that I'm doing. And the key thing, so you can kind of see there's quite a few. Again, it's possible, I'd say, I don't know, probably 50% of the time I use the standard format, but quite often if there's something particular going on, I'll put in a particular section. So if I've got I might have a requirement section or something like that. But essentially we go, and there's no particular order when you're filling this in, so don't feel like you kind of just go, you probably start with a summary of the project and things like that. But summary of the project, what's the purpose of the project and the justifications for the project, goals and objectives, what's in and out of scope, what are your success criteria? So it gets back to that marking schedule.
Mm,
What's an A plus? What's a
mm,
win? How does what does success look like? The budget and costs. So quite often when we're working, we've only got a certain amount of hours or a certain amount of money to spend. So what's that? What are timelines, milestones, and gates? The major deliverables is a really important one. What assumptions are we making about it? Risks and issues, constraints and dependencies, stakeholders, and team roles and responsibilities. And this might feel like, if you heard the term over egging the cake, so I would only fill out the bits that I kind of needed to on a particular project. I wouldn't just fill every section out
just for the sake of it.
you know,
So do
for the
you,
sake of filling it out. I'd just fill out the
yeah.
stuff that I need.
So what would you, once you've got this view, so I can see how this is a great, like a one-pager overview. Um,
Yep,
I can see how this could be a really useful project artifact for the whole project because you can, again, in one page, you
yep,
can communicate the essence of what's happening in a particular project. Um, do you use it like that,
yep.
or how do you typically use it? Is it just for
That's
yourself
mainly
or
how I
for the
do use it.
project?
I mainly A lot of the stuff that I do is so I do work and probably in past employers more in big projects, and I do something like this just for the BA aspect of it.
Okay.
But a lot of what I do at the moment, I'm kind of almost like a PM, you know, mini PM,
Okay.
small letter PM, big letter BA, small
Yeah.
letter change manager type thing.
Yeah.
And so I would do it for my piece of work. Um, the other thing that we have done quite recently is it was quite a big project, and essentially we did a big requirements list, and it wasn't an IT project, it was actually a transformer project for transpowers, introducing a new type of transformer. And so I pulled together a big list of requirements. So if we were going to do this new transformer type, what are the requirements that we need to kind of capture? And it was like, I'm going to say like 80 requirements that we had to think about. So what we then did is we broke it down into like a work stream, or we themed them, and then we
Mm.
did a one of these for each of the themes, and there ended up being about eight,
Okay.
and it just made it feel a little bit more manageable. So there was like
Yeah.
we have design standards, so we had a design standards charter, and then we had like maintenance, because there's different maintenance regimes, so we had a maintenance charter and that sort of thing. And so we ended up having one of these for the main project, for the
Mm.
main piece of work, which is the overview, and then we had one of these for each of those work streams, and then we were able to manage each one of the those groups of, so it was either a single person or a single function within
Mm.
the organization, or where they were similar, we kind of just pulled them together. Or the kind of the rats and mice might have just been a rats and mice kind of one, but
Yeah.
there was every one of those requirements fell into one of those charters, and then we found we could more easily manage the project, and we were able to sit down with those people and actually agree. This is the charter. This is deliverables. These are things. What risks do you see, and actually work through it with them so that there was kind of minimizes surprises.
Yeah, and it's a great way to not just break down the work and into the logical categories, but you can then allocate work. It just makes it a lot more understandable for people to kind of the scope of a particular stream. Like in that case, you would know, okay, for this stream, the purpose is this. This is what we're trying to achieve for this stream, and these are the specific risks we make or have, and the assumptions we're making. That's amazing. And
Yeah,
that's why I really like the work that I've seen you do, Greg. It's so practical and it actually, it's something you're taking all this experience and all these best practices and you're bringing it into a very practical view that works. So well done on
thanks.
this. This is another one that's really deserves its place in your 7 indispensable tools.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Mm.
Awesome. All right. So the sixth one is a action plan, an action plan.
Okay.
So I find this really useful. I just generally keep one of these for the project.
Mm.
Um, and it's really simple. It's kind of who's going to do what by when and how. Um, I heard I went on a course years and years and years ago, and that was about the only thing I got out of it was that phrasing of the thing. I just kind of rolls off the tongue, but who's going to do what when and how. And then if you kind of nail that for every piece of work within your project, and then get it down onto something like this and track it,
Mm.
then you're chasing people, you're closing loops, which is another thing, closing the loop.
Mm.
A project manager told me years ago, Greg, has someone such and such done that? Yeah, no, they said they were going to do it. And he says, no, that's not what I asked you.
Mm.
Have they done it? Close the loop. And I rang them and they're like, oh, crikey, I forgot about that. And so that's really stuck with me.
Mm.
So having an action plan like this, and then actually using it and actually
Yeah.
closing the loops and having dates, and then following up with people and saying, have you done this? You said you're going to do it, or you said that you're going to do this by Friday. You on track? All
Mm.
of that sort of stuff. Really powerful. And people will generally, if they've got 50 things to do, they'll do the stuff for the people that follow up, and they'll ignore the stuff for people that don't follow up,
Mm.
um, or they'll leave it down in their priorities. So I find this works really well. And yeah,
No,
um,
it's great. And I think, it's interesting. I have, with my experience on projects, something not the same exactly as this, but similar. Also a way to track what still needs to be done by who. It is it's in many ways a simple tool, but it makes a big impact on the project. I know that, people would be like, oh, Esther, you're so organized, you're making sure that we're getting everything done. And then, from my perspective, it's just basically keeping track on in a simple template. But it's a huge impact. And I really do recommend this for all the business analysts to, embrace this in whatever context you're working, because not only will you're almost that central point where people will come to you to track and make sure that things are happening, which is amazing for you as a team member. But it's also you're performing a really important kind of task on the project that makes a big difference.
yeah,
So yeah, that
I
is
absolutely agree.
yes, and it's not always just the project manager that needs to track and chase everybody.
Yeah,
It's, a BA can very easily jump in and basically, even if you just do it for your domain, so for all the business analysis work, this would be a really useful tool.
yeah. Yeah, and you can sit down if it is a project with a project manager, you can sit down,
Mm.
you can talk them through it as well, and yeah, there's a ton of ton of really
I'll probably
useful
love it.
use cases. Yeah, for sure. So the final one is the decision analysis tool. And this one here is if you've got to make a decision, and it can be a big decision, it can be a little decision that, not everything's earth shattering, but sometimes if you've just got a decision, if you can sit down and you can work through it, and you can kind of say, well, option one is we do nothing, we just go with the status quo.
Mm.
What's the general overview of that? What does that look like? What are the pros and cons of that? It's generally quite cheap, cheap in the short term. Could be more expensive in the long term. And then the cons, what's the timeline? So how long will it take? What are the expected resource requirements and costs? So quite often, in this case, it might be pretty low because if it's the status quo, assumptions, constraints, and risks. And then the stakeholder supported by, and what sort of support do you get for that? And then the option two will be, well, we could develop an entirely new, whether it's a system or a process or something like that. Pros and cons of that, and so, quite often I find the pros of one is the cons of another, and that sort of thing. So once you've done one, you kind of copying and pasting and putting it in different
Okay.
columns, and that's it. You can do these generally quite quickly. Time frames, same headings, and then option three, is just another option, and then this might be the recommended one. And then description and working through the same, and then you can kind of I've done this where I've filled it out and then I've just gone to people and said, here are the options. I've also done it as actually just in a group, and
Okay.
kind of just working through it together. And a lot of the time you actually find that once you've actually worked through this, the option becomes quite obvious. In the group, you kind of just get this sense that, okay, it's going to be this one. And then
Hmm.
if you can kind of record who was there, who made that decision, then it's pretty easy to go to your business owner and say, hey, look, we had this thing, we had 3 different routes we could go. This is people I spoke to. This is the process that we went through. We've kind of documented it all. This is a decision that we made. Do you accept this? And they go, yep. And then you just kind of move on. So this stuff, when you do it enough times, it becomes almost like second nature. You can just kind of just do it
Hmm.
and move on. So don't feel like this is all of a sudden a massive bureaucracy that you're kind of creating in your projects. So
Yeah, and I think actually in an environment where you've got a lot of bureaucracy and you do have specific hoops to jump and processes to follow when you try and make these decisions, I think this tool is still extremely useful because you can use it as a mechanism to kind of create that decision in a bird's eye view kind of way by facilitating the sessions using this particular template,
yeah,
making it really obvious, doing the communication, getting people on board with the decision and so on. And then everything else that you still have to complete, the process side, you can use this as a key input into that to meet whatever that those hoops might be that you have to jump through to make decisions.
yeah,
So yeah, again, a very practical application to what it should be
yeah,
when we do this decision making and options analysis and things like that. It just really helps to keep it really clear.
right.
So yeah, it's a great number 7. So Greg, you have shared with us 7 extremely useful tools that I love the practical view that you've taken on each of them, and the
Thank
way
you.
that you have picked them comes purely from somebody who is working practically, having to deliver things in a way that is professional, and it's very, very good. Not just tools to bring organization and structure to a bit of chaos sometimes that people forget to just put a bit of structure in it. But you've done it so professionally, so clear. I really do love it. I think, and
Thank
I
you.
agree with you that yes, there is, requirements and user stories and all that stuff that kind of sits around a lot of the projects. But essentially, this is like the backbone stuff that runs that project from A to Z.
Yeah.
And you've nailed those techniques
Oh,
or
thank you.
those tools. Wow, thank you so much for taking us through all of those tools and for sharing it with everyone. I think it's going to make a big difference in how people approach their own projects because it's easy to kind of get lost. And this is giving us a great framework to work against. So thank you very much for doing that, Greg.
You're
So if
welcome.
people wanted to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
I think the best way would be LinkedIn. So Greg Lemaire, Lemaire in New Zealand. You'll find me Senior Business Analyst.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Greg. That's excellent. So I will get all of the details down there in the description so that people can easily
Okay.
find you.
Okay.
But also, guys, if you've liked this video or you want to learn more and get more similar videos where we share different topics together, me and Greg, please do subscribe and then you won't miss anything. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Esther.